Hi guys, my name is Jacqueline Salona and I'm here to give you guys a brief overview about Group 1's host country, which was India, and a little bit about our campaign, which was Do the Rex by Durex, our product, and how Durex aimed to promote healthy sex lives and safe sex to the Indian population. In Do the Rex campaign, Durex is put to test to find a way to market its product to the Indian population and encourage a positive attitude toward sexual well-being that drives behavioral change and purchasing habits. The problem is that the subject of condoms continues to be a taboo in India, and as a result, only 5% of the population uses condoms. So it was really important for India to promote and to create a campaign that really just emphasized how important it was and how necessary it is to, practice safe sex, and it shouldn't be spoken about as an embarrassing or shameful thing. That it should be, danced upon, and you should be happy about it. And there's nothing really wrong with safe sex. So, the history of Durex. Durex was named in 1929 by the SSL International PLC. It's known as the Durability, Reliability, and Excellence condom. SSL has been one of the UK's dominant healthcare companies, globally marketing and manufacturing a variety of well-known brands, such as Durex condoms, Dr. Scholl foot care, footwear products, and etc. In July 2010, Reckitt Benckiser Group, also a British multinational consumer goods company, bought out SSL and now runs a Durex brand. Durex currently produces about 1 billion units of condoms year-round, controlling close to 20% of the global market share in condoms. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of India, just so you all can get a better understanding of how Durex had to promote its product to the country, and a little bit of why India is very traditional, very whether that be culturally, economically, media related, and etc. So, India is arguably the world's largest democracy, with 325 spoken languages, 1,652 dialects, and 18 official languages. Due to the migration, invasion, and expansion of many countries, such as the Mongols, the Greeks, the British, India has had many different influences throughout its history. India was a very wealthy country economically and culturally until the British colonized in 1857. Eventually, India granted its independence again in 1947, after which a very slow progression has been seen in its development. Present-day India has made significant advancements in large-scale industrialization. It produces almost every conceivable good, industrial item, and consumer goods, and has achieved significant success in frontier scientific research and nuclear energy, space and satellite research, communication technology, and biotechnology. As for the political side of India, India is a fairly stable democracy as of now, despite its major corruption, poor infrastructure, and fiscal deficits. There is a huge poverty rate in India, and there's no really any middle class there, so that seems to be a serious problem for many of people in the Indian society. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who took office in 2015, is known for reviving the economy and stimulating India's foreign policy. And with lower global oil prices, the economy has been sustaining a growth rate of about 7%. So culturally, India is one of the oldest living civilizations on Earth, and its traditions are shaped by its long history and heritages. The country's language, religion, music, architecture, and cuisines differ throughout the region. It is 80% Hindu, but also home to one of the world's largest Muslim populations. From an early age, children are reminded of their roles and places in society. Indian tradition states that the woman must first obey their father, then their husband, then their son throughout their lives. Arranged marriages are still a dominant tradition, and it is common to have 3 or 4 generations living under the same roof. The divorce rate in India is fairly low compared to the one in America. In America, it's about 50%, whereas in India, the divorce rate is 1.1%. Many believe gods and spirits have an intrinsic role in determining their role in life, which goes to show how spiritual the Indian society is. As for the media of India, Indian media is among the oldest and largest media all over the world. The country has been independent throughout most of its history. The country's media is made up of a variety of different forms of communication, such as television, cinema, radio, magazines, newspapers, and internet-based websites and portals. India is the second largest market in the world for newspapers, and in 2007, the country consumed a total of 99 million newspaper copies. As of 2009, India is among the fourth largest television broadcast stations in the world, with nearly 1,400 stations. So, is India a high context or a low context culture? India is a classic example of a high context culture. Hall, who introduced this expression, is best known for categorizing cultural differences between society as high context or low context. In high context cultures, such as those of the Middle East, Africa, and many Asian societies, much is left implicit and plainly expressed. Hierarchy is very common, and relational hierarchy is more important than logical arguments. In low context cultures, such as the United States, communication is explicit and information flows freely. In India, social stratification is the norm. India is fairly in a hierarchy society, which plays a key role in it's the way they do business on a daily basis. This system categorizes people into hierarchies based upon their occupation, income, wealth, power, marital status, cultural, religious status, you name it. India's communication style also follows a high context culture expression. In most Indian languages, talking to an elderly person is usually done in respectful forms. So you can kind of think of a low context society as your relationship with your family, whereas your mom is seen more of the authority and the authoritative figure, and then your grandpa is your grandpa, and you act with him a certain way, and with your younger siblings, you're usually the one in command, or you're the one that usually tells them what to do. So you can kind of think of low context cultures, high context cultures as as your relationship with your family and loved ones. When describing Hofstede's cultural dimensions in relationship to the Do the Rex campaign, it was really interesting to see India's scores and how it related to the campaign strategies and what they needed to do to implement the right message to the right people within the population. According to the Hofstede's cultural dimension, India's level of power distance is at 77, indicating the acceptance and appreciation of an Indian society has for social stratification and hierarchy. This form of authoritative hierarchy is a major obstacle, or was a major obstacle, for the Do the Rex campaign, as the targeted publics are less likely to purchase a product that is not accepted by their spouse or head of household. In terms of individualism, India's score is rather an intermediate one of 48, which gave arose a major opportunity for both sides, which was really interesting. The collectivist side reveals that there is a high desire for self-acceptance, in which individuals act in accordance to a group that they are affiliated with. These people are strongly influenced by the opinions of others, such as family members and friends. The individualism score reveals that if the campaign appeals to the majority of its target publics, individuals will have a strong desire for the product solely because of its popularity. So this is good, because if let's say you're targeting to millennials from the ages of 18 to 27, if the majority of the people that they're affiliated with like the product, then that means that they're just going to automatically like Durex because of its popularity, and they're just going to purchase it. So it was really interesting to read that. India's individualistic traits also arise as an opportunity for the campaign because the score guarantees that the other half of the population could be willing to support the Do the Rex campaign despite the opinions of others. So these people can kind of be seen as the rebels. If even just because the majority of society doesn't like the product, they are still likely to purchase it just because the majority of the population doesn't like it. As for masculinity, India's dimension score is 56 and is thus considered a masculine society. Because men are most likely to be the head of household and determine whether something should be purchased, being that they do control the finances, it is imperative that they are primarily targeted throughout the campaign. India's dimension score for uncertainty, avoidance, and long-term orientation reveal that a significant portion of the country welcomes change and adjustment. This puts the campaign in a positive light, as it will attempt to alter the country's negative views of condoms. India's score of 26 in the indulgence dimension signifies that it is a culture of restraint. These societies tend to believe that indulging themselves in anything is somewhat wrong, and this was a major problem for the Do the Rex campaign because as the campaign promotes safe sex, it does promote pleasurable sex. So this may be seen as an indulging thing for much of the Indian society. So when determining and discussing the host country rank and corruption perceptions index and the impact it had on the Do the Rex campaign, I found that it did not have much of an impact because the Do the Rex campaign was very successful. So the definition of corruption perception index. The corruption index is a ranking of countries according to the extent to which corruption is believed to exist. It was created in 1995 by Transparency International, and it ranks about 200 countries on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 indicating high levels of corruption and 10 indicating low levels. 0 to 100. Developed countries typically rank higher than developing nations due to stronger regulations. So India ranks 76 out of 168 countries in its latest corruption index. India has a grade index score of 38 out of possible 100, which indicates the least corruption. So being that it's 38, 0 being the highest form of corruption, 38 is not that far from that, so it does signify a large amount of corruption in India. Although it does have, large form of corruption, this is the second least corruption rank for India in the whole of South Asia. India is now a fairly stable democracy, and although there are some speculations that Indian media is owned by corrupt politicians and industrialists who play a role in misleading the public with inaccurate information, the campaign did not seem to be affected by this. Immediately upon posting the Do the Rex video, the campaign went viral on social media. Within a short time, the YouTube video received over 3 million views. The song was streamed and downloaded over 1.6 million times, and the microsite had over 400,000 visits. The earned media value for the campaign was more than 50% of the Do the Rex annual budget, and the product sales received a 100% increase compared to the previous quarter. It also the campaign also received over 100 articles in Indian media which were positive, which was really interesting. So as for the primary and secondary publics, Do the Rex campaign targeted young urbanites who would be more open to engaging in discussions around sex. They lived in Tier 1 metropolitan areas such as Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Kolkata, and Mumbai. These areas have a population of 100,000 plus people or higher and are more likely exposed to a large-scale variety of global, social, and lifestyle trends. This demographic had the most potential when discussing sex as pleasurable and exciting. Through the partnership with Ranveer Singh, a well-known and admired actor in India, targeted publics were more inclined to engage in discussions around the subject of sexual well-being. Ramgir spoke to the Indian people about safe sex through a language they knew would connect with the love. Bollywood song and dance hosted on YouTube. The 2-minute film promoted condoms in a cheerful and positive light and asked viewers to celebrate sex by doing a new dance and move called the Rex. Direx's partnership with Digital's LBI, a global marketing and technology agency, allowed for the campaign to successfully get people talking about responsible sex. Through research, practitioners identified editors who were known for their controversial articles and had a modernized view of society. By offering these large national media houses in India first access to the campaign's video content, Do the Rex was able to break free of the traditional views that restricted stories in Indian press. This encouraged smaller media houses to carry the conversation forward. Print media was highly successful in the campaign and generated over 120 positive sentimental articles in India, also landing a spread in the Times of India. The secondary audience was the Indian population as a whole. This was because, they do just want to get they do want to just get the Durex product out there and just, create awareness about safe sex and promote healthy living and promote the form of contraception. So it was really important that the secondary audience, which is the Indian population, that they just develop a new modernized point of view when it came to just sexual tendencies and preventative measures.
Hi, my name is Mariah Gaynor, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my part of the project. So on top of the situation analysis, I'm going to talk a little bit about the SWOT analysis and just a general overview of the themes, objectives, and strategies and tactics we can see in our campaign. So for the SWOT analysis, we're going to be focusing on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as seen to Durex in India. So starting with the strength. One of them that I found was the history of sex in India. It's more a modern thing and a colonialism thing by the British as seen in our last segment, meaning that there was an underlying fact that sex at one point is accepted. At its very core religion, it's not a taboo, it's not it's not a Hinduist thing, which tends to have a lot more emphasis on the society. The second thing would be globalization. With India being open up to the world and being a democracy, we're seeing a lot more globalization in the area, especially in the urban areas. So people are more used to seeing products not from India. Take Chanel, for example, McDonald's. A lot of other industries are starting to take root in India. The third strength would be the large urbanite and youth population. This is especially key for our campaign because that's who Durex chose to focus on. The people who could have the most impact on, the people who would be most accepting. A lot of people in India do live in these cities, and they are skewed to a 26 average year-old age, meaning that they had a lot of people to play off with in this population. Finally, we're working with a company that has a strong global presence. The brand that owns Durex happens to be one of the largest and most respectable. It started in 1925 under London Rubber and has been along for a very long time. They know what they're doing. So they have that respect and that ethos that comes with it, even to India. The weakness is, on the flip side, sex is a taboo in India. It might not be rooted in Hinduism or religion as seen by Kama Sutra or anything like that, but it is a taboo in modern day. So it's something that people just aren't talking about and aren't comfortable with immediately. Second one would be the caste system. It makes it very difficult to address an entire population when it's so segmented. It also makes sure that people who are impoverished and are illiterate kind of pass it down as cyclic. Third is poverty. There's a lot of poverty in India. I believe upwards of like 30% are impoverished. I think it was actually more like 55%. So meaning the condoms might not necessarily be their biggest issue. About 24% lived on less than $1.25 a day. Next would be the opportunities. Opportunity is a great industry for growth, as only 5% of people who are sexually active actually use condoms as contraceptive, whether it be because they don't know or they're just not comfortable talking about it or sharing it with a partner. It's the fact that only 5% use that really makes an impact. Another opportunity is that this was a great chance to create a campaign that wasn't awkward or crass like many others. While Durex is in India and has been since 2009, it's the sixth most popular compared to Indian brands, and those are more for nationality's sake. Their ads are mostly awkward and crass, so this kind of gave a new life and a new angle to an otherwise awkward topic and an awkward situation. Finally, threats. The threat is that condoms have low brand loyalty. Oftentimes, they're bought unexpectedly, randomly at the last second, and they're cheap. So it's tough to really create an image for it. Second of all, there's a lot of high competition in India in this market. Durex isn't an Indian brand. It doesn't have that sound to it. It doesn't have the name. It doesn't have that iconic cultural recognition. Finally, having a general health campaign against STDs or STIs like they were going for does have its downside. If Durex isn't a main brand or a main proprietor, then unfortunately it might drive toward competition. And while one of the goals is to increase awareness, ultimately it's a business looking to generate revenue as well. So that's your SWOT. The next thing I'm going to go over is a quick overview of the campaign. So the tagline that they came up with is "Do the Reps." That's the campaign. And the agencies that took it on were Edelman India and Digitas LBI. So the theme is basically safe sex is fun and remarkable. Basically saying it's not something you should be ashamed of. You have this big Bollywood star, he's having a blast with it, he's talking about sex, and it makes it cool, makes it hip, it makes it fun, it makes it modern, but most of all, it makes it relevant and something that you should be comfortable talking about. The second one is objective. The objective was to overcome cultural taboos to stimulate sexual discourse. So they wanted to start these conversations. But also, it is a business. They wanted to increase direct sales by kind of associating this image of fun so that when people go out and buy condoms, they understand, who do you want, the fun brand or the crafts brand? Up to you. Third is strategies. The strategy that they took was to focus on a very segmented part because on top of the caste system, India has a wide variety of cultures, languages, religions. So they chose to focus on young urbanites because they knew that's who they could get the message across to because they were most aware of globalization, they had access to media, and they're most likely to be a coming of a new age rather than a time known where England was in power. So they're more open to change, especially by Western settlers. They also wanted to engage Bollywood community and used Ranveer Singh, as the face, as a way for them to relate. They wanted to make it as popular as a movie star. So some of the tactics that they used were creating a viral music video, using the hashtag #DoTheReps, and basically making it explode online. They blasted on Facebook and Twitter to ensure that people saw it, kept seeing it, and had engagement. And they also used microsite, dothereps.com, for people to post their own spoofs, dances, fun stuff online. By fun stuff, I meant more like basically parodies. It was a great way to interact with the crowd. So now that you know a lot of the generals, we're going to get a little bit more into the specifics.
Hey everyone, my name is Taylor Paetzel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the specifics of the campaign itself. So we've looked at the situational analysis, our target audience, and the general overview of the campaign, but we're going to get a little more specific. So in this section, what I'm going to do is go over what public relations looks like in India. I'm also going to go over a brief history of sex in India and why it has such a conservative view now. And then we will also look at the communications tools used for the campaign, and we're also going to look at the circuit of culture and how it comes into play here. So public relations has always been present in India, even if it wasn't strictly called public relations. But now that India is growing as an economic power and there are many multinational corporations, the need for public relations professionals is always on the rise. A familiar form of public relations in India arose around the time when Indian railways started to become popular. And these railways started to advocate travel and tourism through campaigns. So that is the first sort of break in public relations in India. Later, India gained independence from Great Britain in 1947, so public relations practitioners saw a need to start creating relationships with these giant corporations and also with the government in this time of change. In 1948, PRSI, which is the Public Relations Society of India, was founded, and then 10 years later, the Code of Ethics was created. The field of public relations is still changing, and PRSI and big corporations are hopefully pushing public relations in the right direction in India today. The biggest drawbacks for PR today are the remnants of the caste system, which basically socially stratifies people in India based on class, based on religion, based on occupation. So what it basically does is make some people, I would say, more important than others, and then others would be more subordinate than others. Another challenge is the challenge of convincing people that the field is detrimental to success, organizational success. So I think public relations struggles a little bit with legitimacy in India as well. And then now there are degree programs in public relations in India, but there's room for improvement as far as education on the subject goes. So now let's take a look at the history of sex in India. And some of you might think, why does this matter? But it's important to know why the discussion of sex in India is taboo, because it's part of the reason why the campaign came about. So sex in India was not always seen as taboo. In fact, one of the most widely known ancient texts on sexual human behavior came from the Hindu philosopher Vatsyayana, and it was called the Kama Sutra, as many of you know. A lot of ancient texts and art in India depicted nudity, and it had the idea that sex was seen as a natural and mutual duty between a husband and a wife. And a lot of times in ancient India, clothing was seen as more of a fashion statement than a necessity to wear, so a lot of people would even walk around topless, or sometimes with nothing at all, but for the most part, the bottom half was covered. But things started to change when Britain took over India in the late 1600s, early 1700s. It started first with the East India Trading Company, but the British progressively took over India, and with it came their Victorian values. So they had probably one of the largest effects on culture of India and its attitude towards sex, because the liberal sexual nature of the Indian people were seen as barbaric to the British. So now this sexual conservatism is considered the norm, because the British thought that their liberalism was completely barbaric. Now with globalization and better education, people are rediscovering the topic of sexual liberalism, and it's taking hold in some metropolitan areas. However, the topic of sex is still widely not discussed. And because of that, some companies are trying to make sex a comfortable topic to talk about in India, and this is where Durex comes in. Durex is a widely known company whose products include condoms and other things like sex toys and lubricants, and the reason why Durex is having such an issue in India is because only about 5% of people wear condoms. And it's a little bit different in India. When you have to buy condoms, you have to ask a pharmacist for it. So the fact that sex is so uncomfortable to talk about, people don't want to ask pharmacists for condoms. So because of the discomfort, the topic of safe sex and STDs, STIs are not properly addressed. So Durex wanted to break through the mold and make a condom campaign that didn't make people cringe and look away. They wanted to keep people's attention and convince people to use Durex condoms to have great and safe sex. And that in turn will make people want to do the Rex. And that was the slogan, if you will, of the campaign. So the Do the Rex campaign was created by the creative minds of Digitas, LBI, and Edelman India. And Edelman tackled the communicative aspects of it, and then Digitas tackled the more creative social media campaign aspect of it. But Edelman's main goal was to challenge a select group of editors to change the discussion of sex. The company also wanted to drive the views of the Do the Rex video with Ranveer Singh, and also get the press interested. And to do this, they had to analyze their competitors and their share of voice in the market. And they had to reach out to senior media editors and gauge their willingness to talk about sex with their readers. So Edelman targeted a young group of people who live in metropolitan areas, and they were exposed to all kinds of global social and lifestyle trends. And then Edelman did a bunch of research, and they chose certain editors who would help Durex, spread the news of safe sex. So Edelman offered first access to the video to certain media houses that would be open to talking about safe sex with their readers. And then by offering this exclusive access, they expanded their sphere of influence with the media. And the key publications that were offered the access gave basically bigger and better format coverage. And this encouraged the smaller media houses to also carry on the conversation about Durex and Durex. The campaign received 16 full-page national stories in leading Indian publications, such as Times of India and The Hindu. It had 60 minutes of broadcast coverage solely dedicated to the campaign, and that led to over $700,000 in advertising value equivalency. Within the first week, the branded film content was viewed on YouTube over 1 million times, and within the first month, it was over 2 million views, and now it sits at about 3 million views. So Digitas, on the other hand, created things, for example, like a microsite, and this is where people could record their dance moves, kind of like Ranveer did in his video. And this website had about 1 million hits in the first 5 days, and more than half of the people who clicked on the site stayed on it for an extended period of time. So Digitas also partnered with major fashion, film, student bloggers, and basically they reached over 6 million users at the very start of the campaign. This wasn't even at the end of the campaign, it was at the start. So this helped Digitas different competitions. They had a Twitter competition, and basically it encouraged people to enthusiastically share videos, GIFs, images, artwork, and their own dance moves. So Digitas invested in certain media outlets that included the promotion of Durex's Facebook posts, partnerships with MTV, and the partnership with MTV also included a special online segment called Rex Talks, where basically Ranveer openly talked about safe sex and encouraged others to be more open in talking about it. It was a way for people to sit down and actually discuss and hear about things like STDs, safe sex, and other precautions. And they also invested in VH1 to promote the video on their own social channels and banners on YouTube and the Indian Premier League site. So as a result, more than 120 positive articles by top bloggers and online publishers were written, and a huge number of fans started to share the video on social channels. And many of India's most powerful social influencers started doing the Rex too. All in all, they racked up about 30 million impressions on, via social press and blogs, and they created over $350,000 in earned media value. Lastly, let's look over the circuit of culture and how it's related to this campaign. This is something we've been looking at often in class, and it's comprised of 5 different parts: regulation, production, representation, consumption, and identity. In its simplest form, regulation refers to the different rules, laws, and regulations of a culture or a country. So it's the moment that meanings arise governing what's acceptable or what's correct. There are plenty of regulations in India regarding the topic of sex. For example, the distribution and production of pornography is illegal, but watching it on your own time in your private life is completely legal. Sex trafficking in India is tolerated yet regulated, and in Indian media, sex scenes and even kissing scenes are usually not even shown. However, scenes of rape and sexual abuse can be shown, which is interesting because in Indian culture it's taboo also to speak about being sexually assaulted, but it's allowed to be shown on TV. And finally, condom advertisements in India are tolerated, but they're usually very uncomfortable to watch, and it doesn't hold many people's attention, so that's why Durex decided to create this campaign about condoms and safe sex. Production is when creators of cultural products encode them with meaning. It's the actual production and execution of a campaign. So Edelman India and Digitas LBI went into the campaign with the idea that sex is a natural, enjoyable phenomenon that shouldn't inflict fear into people when being talked about. So therefore, this is why Edelman in particular researched the field and chose target media that would be willing to talk about sex openly. If there was no targeting of these open-minded editors and media outlets, the campaign wouldn't have been as successful. So representation is the form an object takes and the meanings encoded in that form. Edelman India and Digitas LBI made Durex seem like a fun and exciting brand by choosing such a young target audience. And the audience is usually the most sexually liberal. They created the key message that true love and great sex together create a singularly spectacular experience that deserves to be celebrated by everyone. And by choosing media outlets like YouTube and Twitter, where young people are usually involved, it makes the messages easily shareable. Consumption is when messages are decoded by audiences. Sometimes there is a lot of problems with consumption because people can decode it in a way that wasn't intended. So overall, the people responded positively to the campaign. There were thousands of millions of shares and views on social media sites, and the comments on the YouTube video were all pretty positive. A lot of people were expressing shock that a condom ad could be so catchy. Many fans used the hashtag #DoTheRecs and also showcased some of their dance moves on social media, making the hashtag and campaign trend on Facebook and Twitter. As sex was a touchy subject in India and still is, some people are still on the fence about it, and it seemed that people used the campaign as a way to be more open about the subject. Identity, finally, is the need to create an organizational identity. Again, Edelman India and Digitize LBI created an organizational identity for Durex. And Durex is seen as the top leader for selling condoms and is also seen as a brand that's not boring. Durex cares about the well-being of people and not just trying to prevent STDs or pregnancies, but it also promotes natural and safe sex and sexual behavior, and it tries to make people not afraid when talking about such an important subject. So now that we've talked about the specifics of the campaign, let's look at the evaluation of the campaign.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the campaign evaluation, and I'm going to go through the analysis, the reaction of the campaign, a little bit of critiques, and some recommendations from the team. So as far as analysis, the whole campaign had kind of a focus around a main video, which they put on their YouTube channel. And within the first 2 months, this video already had 3 million YouTube views. They also created the hashtag #DoTheRecs, which reached over 20 million people because it started trending on both Twitter and Facebook, which was extremely successful. The microsite, which they built kind of just for this campaign as a hub for people to go and find out more about safe sex, had 1 million views for the first 5 days since the campaign launched. This campaign was also extremely successful with its partnerships. They had MTV, VH1, and also the Premier League of India, which is cricket, which they used during the campaign and even to implement some more information after the campaign had finished. They also had 16 full pages of national stories, 30 million impressions, and they estimate around $350,000 worth of media value. So overall, the different metrics that they used to evaluate the campaign showed that the campaign was extremely successful and they took the right steps in both measuring the campaign and implementing the campaign. So some of the reactions from the target audience were very popular. The campaign was also very popular for the media, which was extremely important. The main video, which was the focus of the campaign, took a more lighter tone and kind of a fun approach to the topic of safe sex, which helped tons because the word sex isn't even mentioned in the video. #DoTheRecs is kind of the theme, and this kind of helped make and spark a conversation to kind of help the taboo of sex without being too blunt about the message of safe sex. Even during the video, some of the more sexual scenes were toned down to kind of a more respectable side of it, to match that Indian culture that is more reserved. Also, you can see that the campaign was successful because some of the reactions were actually parody videos in a fun way. Some artists, some famous people, Bollywood A-listers in India did parody videos of the #DoTheRecs campaign, which helped continue the conversation and kind of expand the life of the campaign post the timeline that was originally created. Some of the critiques that our teams has, the campaign is very male-focused. It shows how safe sex can be practiced by men and what men can do to take that first approach to talk about safe sex and to practice it and to, the use of condoms. It doesn't really mention what women can do to learn more about having safe sex or that topic in general. However, this is more of a comment rather than a critique because it shows that they did their research, and their culture research shows that India is a more male-dominant society, so the target audience was more males, not females, which in the end, we think contributed to the success of the campaign. Some of the recommendations we had, also have sort of been implemented already by Durex and their post Do the Rex campaign. And that would be to kind of expand the conversation. We know that safe sex is a topic that needs to be brought to India, but where can we get more information about what safe sex means and what we can do about it? So what they've already done is they've taken their sponsor, their Bollywood A-lister, and they've done these Rex talks with him. And so on their YouTube site, there's videos about safe sex and different topics. And one of the opportunities they used was World AIDS Day, in which they created a video talking about safe sex and furthering the campaign. So that was kind of our recommendation, and how they should not just have had a successful campaign, but how they should carry this conversation and keep selling it without really mentioning their brand. I think the campaign was also very successful. As we talk more in the conclusion, it's an award-winning PR Week campaign, and this is because they did the research, and it was an approach that wasn't, here's my brand, here's Durex, buy our condoms. It was more so kind of leaving the name of the product out and helping the audience understand that safe sex is important, and oh look, we have a product that can help you practice safe sex. Another piece of the conclusion is that it shows us that campaigns with the right spokesperson can be extremely successful. So they did a lot of research to who should be their spokesperson, and finding kind of a funny, lighter toned personality really helped in their campaign. You have to remember that when you pick a representative, they're going to be the face of your brand, so you have to be very careful. And then the last conclusion, to wrap it up, is kind of their success in narrowing their target audience. They didn't just want to talk to people or the population of India as a whole. They chose a younger audience, they chose a male audience, and I think this helped with the impact of the campaign. Because the research was done well, and they knew who they needed to target in order to make their campaign very successful. So all in all, this was a fantastic campaign that was a lot of fun to research, and we think they did a great job. Durex did a great job in both their messaging and their creativity.